Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Noel Casler podcast, episode 49. We're happy to be here with you. It's been another crazy week, as you all know. Big ice storm on the East Coast last night, but we're here recording. It's Saturday morning. I'm here with my main man, Jumpin' Jimmy Kennedy. Jimmy James.
How's it going, Noel?
Good, brother. Good. You have a nice week?
It's kind of like The Shining here in Indy, man. We've had a lot of snow. Now it's bitterly cold, so I'm kind of, I had cabin fever before, and now I'm really sealed in the house for a couple of days, but we'll survive. We got plenty of snacks, a lot of good things going around still, even with the weather.
But as long as you got snacks and Netflix, you'll survive, or Showtime. Did you see the Bill Cosby doc I mentioned to you?
Dude, I watched it all. It was very compelling. And, I knew about the Cosby Show, but I didn't really know the full extent of his career and how impactful he was for a long time. And yeah, just a really interesting story. Really well done. If you haven't seen it, I would check it out.
Yeah, well, he was a giant, he was a giant in comedy and a giant in the popular culture. He was this first sort of middle of the road African-American comedian that became a household name. And I was born in 1971. So Bill Cosby was ubiquitous in my childhood. I grew up watching Fat Albert every Saturday morning, and he'd sit and give you, this sort of like moral at the end of it. He'd go on camera and tell a little story to kids. And he was like America's father, and I grew up in my high school years. I was raised by my grandparents and my step grandfather and my grandmother, maternal grandmother. And my step grandfather, Vince, he worked for NBC. He was one of the first big computer guys at NBC. That was his gig. So we would get tickets to go watch him tape the Cosby Show every season. Every year, every NBC employee would, get tickets. And it was a big deal in my family because we all watched the Cosby Show every Thursday night. It was must-see TV, Jimmy. The whole world would watch this, and it was good for all of us to see this prosperous, well-educated, happy, family that was just like what everybody aspired to, in their families. And we all had a blind eye to what was going on, so it was so creepy to watch that doc and see the studio scenes and know that his assistant was pulling women off of the set out of rehearsal to bring them to his dressing room. And comes up in the doc. I won't spoil it for people, but there were these signs, they went through his career. And then you hear him, even on the Cosby Show talking about drugging women and stuff. And I do remember there was something that seemed off about him. You wanted to love him so much and you thought he was going to be this nice guy. And he would come out and talk to the audience before the taping, and he's the reason everyone was there. And he'd come out and do a little Q&A. And I remember he was always super arrogant in these things. They would be like, how much do your sweaters cost? And he'd be like, a lot of money, more than you have, and then they'd be like, how many houses do you have? He's like, I have so many houses, I lost track. But an asshole about it, not oh, thanks to you guys, I have many blessings. How are you today? Thanks for coming. He was clearly an asshole. And then I worked with him, in my own career. I did the American Comedy Awards. He came and got an award, I think, because Seinfeld refused to. So they gave it to Cosby. And I remember he took our escort. I work in the talent logistics. So we assign these talent escorts. They're handlers. I've explained this before. Here, you're assigned to Madonna to follow her around all day. If she needs water or something, let us know. And the one that we gave to Cosby, he took her back to his house, back to his townhouse in the East 60s and on the Upper East Side. And she was thrilled. She was this young African-American girl, spending the day with Dr. Cosby. It was the other thing. You had to call him Dr. Cosby. And even at a comedy show, you're Bill Cosby, you're Fat Albert, nope, Dr. Cosby, and that's fine. He was worthy of respect before we knew this. But I always thought that was strange. I don't think he did anything to her, but it was bizarre. It crossed a line that most talent doesn't cross. And then I remember I did the Mark Twain Prize. He received the Mark Twain Prize at the Kennedy Center. And this was towards the end. I mean, this was right before the scandal broke open, because there was a few false starts, right, where the public didn't really want to grasp onto it. NBC even gave him a contract, in the 2000s, in 2005, like he was, or 15 rather, he was about to get another, NBC Cosby show when the whole thing kind of came tumbling down. But it just shows you the lengths that this industry will go to cover things up like that. Right. And what I took away from it was like, yep, that's the industry I worked in. How a whole TV studio could know a guy was a scumbag, but he was powerful and wealthy, and there was a lot of jobs, involved. So it pays to look the other way. That's what this industry is always rewarded, like keeping your mouth shut and catching a paycheck. Like, and you see that because there's no way people on set didn't know what was happening. He was bringing in 10 models, 15 models every show, sitting in the audience, and then they would line up outside of his dressing room. Like, what do you think he was doing in there? Not to mention, and I'll shut up, but not to mention, people talk. That's what you do on set, is you talk shit about the talent. Like if you're working production, you're going to be talking about that. So there's no way the PAs and the ADs and all these people didn't, know what was going down, but it was willful ignorance. And I'm not putting it on that, or willful blindness. And I'm not blaming them completely. I'm just letting that's how stuff happens. And those patterns carry into our modern life. Right. Jeff Zucker resigned at CNN this week because he had to, right? Because he's having an affair with his longtime girlfriend who lived in the apartment above him and his wife. Okay. Like, this was no secret in New York City society that they're in. Like, this was a long-term affair that their spouses knew about and was basically out in the open. But so he had to retire for that, resign, essentially forced resignation. And also they were giving advice to Andrew Cuomo, when he was governor, right? But so it finally caught up with him, basically because he probably tried to, screw Chris Cuomo out of his paycheck. And Chris is like punching back now. I think that's how that story finally broke. But my point is, Jeff Zucker was the head of NBC Universal Entertainment, right? When The Apprentice was put on, when Celebrity Apprentice that I worked on. And I make this point all the time, like, Jeff Zucker knew what was going down. You didn't work in TV and not know Trump was, molesting contestants on Miss Universe. You did not grow up or live in New York City and not know this guy was laundering money for the mob and was a complete idiot, let alone a billionaire. Because Jeff did him the favor of giving him the job. Trump was broke when he got The Apprentice. He'd blown his father's inheritance, that he strong-armed his siblings into signing away. The dad's business. They sold it for a one-time lump sum. They should have held on to it, but Trump's a terrible businessman. So he blew that money trying to bail out his casinos, and then he was broke. And Jeff Zucker gave him a fat contract and then brought in all his kids. Like I always say, real billionaires don't have their kids come work for them on TV shows, right? My dad's a billionaire. I'm in Monaco right now, racing McLarens, or I'm on a catamaran somewhere in the South Pacific. I'm not in Times Square on Sunday night letting dad know if Little John's pop-up shop is better than Meatloaf's. You know what I'm saying? Right? But that's what you were supposed to believe, that somehow these billionaires had an interest in seeing daddy's reality show. But meeting Clay Aiken, like, it just doesn't add up. And everyone knew it didn't, but he kept his mouth shut. It was a moneymaker. And that's that industry. And that's the kind of stuff we need to blow up, right? We need to stop settling for this, okay? Because it's now institutionalized. Everyone knew Trump was a scumbag in DC and they kept their mouths shut, right? And Mike Pence finally spoke up yesterday, 13 months later, right? Your hometown boy. Is he a hero now for doing that? No, it was his only play left, right? Because Greg Jacob and, Mark Rich or whatever, not Mark Rich, Mark Short, had to go testify. So he knows his two assistants told them everything anyway, the January 6th commission. So he had no play left. And I'll let you handle that. You tell us what you think about your hometown boy.
Well, I mean, I've already told the story about when I met him on the field, that he was very opportunistic when he met me on the field at Lucas Oil Stadium. When he met me, he made a point of saying, "How are you?" Not, "Hey man, what a great environment. Thanks for coming out to the game. Hopefully the Colts win." It was nothing about that. It was more, "Let me get a photo op with the kid that has a walker on the sideline." And, I've been talked to that way by people. I can kind of sense that. So that's the kind of guy that Mike Pence is. He's opportunistic. he waited until the very last minute that he could to overturn American democracy, only when he knew it wouldn't work and he had to say, hey, they're sending fake documents to the National Archives. That's when, you know, he had to say what he said on the 6th, and they wanted to hang him. You know, all of a sudden, the people that wanted to hang you, you're having to say that Trump didn't win. Like, we knew this a year ago. This shouldn't even be a headline. But in today's America, we're that divided that saying a president is wrong becomes a headline. That's crazy.
Yeah, and it's accepting the obvious and not doing anything about it. You know, that's the point I'm trying to make. That's like the opening theme about, you know, Bill Cosby. We're talking about a 50-year career, you know, with a television show or 3 on it every time during that career, right? And nobody wants to really like point out the obvious. I mean, we're talking 1,000 women probably, you know, there's 60 that came forward. So, you know, there's 150, if not 1,000, because the guy was like pathological about it. But my point is, like, you said it best, right? Mike Pence, he waited all day. He knew about this. He was in the middle of this plot. You know, the night before, Giuliani was trying to get into his residence at the Naval Observatory and give him one last consigliaries push on why he had to do this. January 5th, Trump cornered him in the Oval Office. It was like, you're going to do this. And he's like, I can't. I called Dan Quayle. Dan Quayle says I can't, you know? So it wasn't like Mike Pence didn't try every way to Sunday to help this coup, you know, that had been basically planned out in the open for the preceding 6 weeks go forward. And it was only in the last minute when he saw it wasn't going to succeed, right? When the Secret Service was trying to get him to get in the, you know, SUV and get taken off to God knows where, you know, that he was like, okay, I'm going to stay here and certify the ballots. But so he's no hero, and he didn't speak up when he could have. He could have walked away in December and said, hey, these guys are planning on overturning the election, and they've gone so far as to game out seizing voting machines, and they have fake electorates filling out ballots. Now, I may be a Republican, but above it all, I believe in democracy, and it's not the right thing to do. And I need you all to know that. You know, this guy's unfit to serve, and he's planning on doing the worst crime against democracy that we've ever had in this country. But he didn't say that. He showed up there and then he kept his mouth shut for the last year and a half. And it's not like he's volunteering to go speak for the January 6th committee, right? And why isn't the committee subpoenaing him, right? You know, why are we're thinking about maybe calling him forward. Everybody should have been called forward a long time ago. Mark Meadows shouldn't be on his 7th or 8th week, you know, of defying a subpoena without any action from the Justice Department. And everybody's like, well, just give it time. We got to dot these I's and cross these T's. You want to make sure he doesn't get off on a technicality. Technicality? First of all, he's 75 years old. So he's basically already gotten away with it, right? He's having a, you know, $250,000 a person fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago in coming days, right? He's having rallies every goddamn week. He had one last Saturday night and talked about telling his crowds to do the same thing again, right? If he gets arrested, go attack Atlanta, go attack DC, attack New York. You know, he's building an army. And this is what I want people to understand. While we're sitting around and arguing amongst ourselves about how great DOJ is, and it just takes time to build a solid case against a guy, by the way, who's been doing illegal shit for 50 years, right? Just like Bill Cosby, right? Trump has got a lot in common with Bill Cosby. It's the same sort of thing. It's powerful men, you know, that get away with being predators because individuals are like, who am I to take him down? I can't afford a lawyer. And they know that, right? And that's the thing we need to end. That's the cycle we need to break. And that's what we need the Department of Justice to understand, that like, we're not in normal times. It doesn't go back to normal when you let somebody do this. You know, he molested democracy. Okay. You need to go in there and kick some ass. It doesn't have to be all the charges, but it has to be some charges, because a bully only stops when you sort of metaphorically punch him in the face. And he needs to know there's pushback. And instead they see weakness, essentially. Democrats don't want to hear that, but Republicans are not scared. They're having rallies every weekend, right? They're having fundraisers. Neil Gorsuch is speaking at the Federalist Society at Disney World with no press allowed, right? The guy who's supposed to be impartial, you know, which is also where Trump's case will probably end up, right? In the Supreme Court. So at least you can start the legal process of holding this guy accountable instead of being silent. Because Benny Thompson said that we're thinking like May or late April for hearings. Well, May or late April for hearings, if you got people that don't show up and defy subpoenas on the hearings, that means if justice moves on those people, it's another 6 or 7 months before they go to trial, right? Steve Bannon defied his subpoena in November and his trial begins in July, right? So you start doing the math because the election's in next November, right? The midterms are this November, right? 11 months, whatever, 10 months from now. You see what I'm saying, Jimmy? You don't have that much time, and democracy doesn't have that much time, because in the meantime, all these chaos agents are hard at work and all these rallies are happening. And it's these rallies where these plans get solidified, right? It's like Trump had a hotel in DC so he could do the real janky stuff in the lounge at Trump Hotel, right? And in the hotel room at the Willard and at his private suite in his hotel. So the same things with these militia guys. You know, the real shit gets talked about in the parking lot in Arizona, right? Before they go inside, when these bros are like, yeah, bro, I got a whole arsenal. I'm ready to throw down. These communist Democrats come try to eat my baby. You know, I'm taking up arms. It's a lot. It's like conventions for serial killers or something. You know, there's a reason you separate prisoners, right? You don't want them together all the time. There's not, you know, do you see what I'm saying? Like, but instead, these people that have done this are having gatherings, weekly gatherings, and they're being fomented and they're being like excited by all these psychopaths, you know, from Gosar to Carrie Lake to you name it, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who this morning said GoFundMe should be arrested because they're not sending money to the Canadian truckers. So my point is they're lighting fires everywhere and nobody's putting these fires out, right? People are like, well, we got to make sure that water is just the right temperature before we point the hose at the burning house because we don't want it to, you know, spook the flames. No, man, you know, pull out the hose and start spraying shit because the house is on fire and we're all going to be dead, you know, if you don't do something about it. They're burning books, right? There's outwardly racist podcast hosts using the N-words 20 times, thinking it's cute and it's humor. It's not. You're reinforcing toxic white male masculinity BS. You know, you're spreading lies and you're getting paid gazillions to do it. It's not free speech. It's certainly not comedy. It's idiocy, right? But it emboldens the ignorant. And anything that emboldens the ignorant, we have to treat as weaponized, malevolent hate speech, because that's what it is. It's not free speech. It's this ignorance that allowed Trump to happen, right? He came down the elevator. He said, I hate Mexicans. Vote for me. Right? And everyone's like, yep, that's our, you know, whatever. Nobody said, hey, that's the guy who was raping contestants on Miss Universe 20 years ago. You know, that's the guy that Jeff Zucker was looking the other way when he was snorting Adderall and grabbing his daughter's ass on the set. And I heard about it 100 times from producers, but I didn't do anything because it was #1 on Sunday nights. And I like money, you know, and I like my house in Bridgehampton, and I like going to Maidstone and playing golf in the summer. So don't rock the boat. And that's what we're in. You know, that's what the Joe Rogan thing is, right? Hey, don't rock the boat. He's making money for us. Spotify should be like, you're out of there, dude. We didn't sign up for this crap. But it's a Swedish guy who looks like Joe Rogan, right? It's the same thing. These white male bros running the world. Mark Zucker lost $200 billion. Facebook lost the other day. Imagine having that kind of money to lose. You know, they spent like $2 to $3 billion on the whole Meta infrastructure. Why not just take that money and house people? You know, you got people sleeping in the streets. We don't need an alternate universe. We need an empathetic, compassionate universe now in the real world. We need to feed and clothe and give people healthcare and education, you know, and stop like the poisoning, you know, of our ideology and of our planet. Mark Zuckerberg could be a hero if he decided he wanted to combat climate change and stuff. Dude could spend the rest of his life making this world a better place and would have a vast fortune and a vast reach to do it. But instead, he wants to make money, right? Because these tech bros become kings in their own minds. And don't get me started on Elon Musk, because that bro is a Bond villain. He's out there tweeting every day, cheering on these Canadian truckers. And it's spreading. You know, it's going to be our greatest export is going to be fascism now. instead of jazz, or rock and roll. It's going to be up because that's an American shit. Truck drivers like being assholes in a capital. And this stuff is also being coordinated by Putin, by the Russians and the chaos agents. The stuff is all similar if you break down the language and how this stuff starts in these chat rooms and everything. So, I know that's a bit of a rant on it, but it's all connected, and it all comes down to money, and it all comes down to wealthy people manipulating ignorant people and giving them the illusion of being powerful. That's what Joe Rogan does. He couches it, to these bros that listen to him on the drive to work. He's like Charlie Rose for them. All of a sudden they feel like intellectuals because they got a guy on who calls himself a doctor and uses big words. And they're like, that does make sense. I hadn't thought about that. Maybe I do have natural immunity. Shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Take your vaccine, so, and it was damaged. People died. I guarantee you people have died because of what Joe Rogan is saying, and that's why Neil Young was like, get my stuff off of there. I don't want my music on there. So, and that's the only muscle you have left in the society, right? Is your ability to decide where you're going to spend your money. That's the only thing that's going to get anybody's attention, right? You can't, the blue wave emoji ain't going to do it in your Twitter feed. You know what I mean? You got to walk the walk.
Well, and, I saw a clip from an old Joe Rogan interview. This was before he signed his big deal and was totally crazy. He was talking about like people need to understand the value of vaccines, talking with an actual epidemiologist and trying to provide actual information in the beginning. But that shows you how much money corrupts things. And one thing that Republicans always made a point to me about was like, Trump gave up his presidential salary and, how selfless that was. Real selflessness would have been, renting out Trump Doral to homeless folks, using his golf courses to house people that needed housing, but he didn't want to take any of those steps because he wants to play golf himself. He spent hundreds of millions of dollars at his own courses on our dime so that he could play golf for free. So yeah, it's a money-making machine, man. At this point, that's what America is. And they're still printing money.
Yeah, no, because it's profitable. It's easier to kick Whoopi Goldberg off for 2 weeks than it is to go after Joe Rogan, or any of this other stuff. And I was Whoopi's escort when she hosted the Tony Awards in 2008. And I've done a lot of other stuff with Whoopi. You won't meet a more compassionate person. She was wrong in what she said. It was ignorant. People don't understand the Holocaust. They don't understand, it was the Hindenburg laws or whatever that said Jews were, an inferior race. Okay. So it was a racist thing, the Holocaust was the epitome of that, of racism. And, she misspoke and apologized. And it showed an opportunity for a better dialogue of understanding the horrors of the Holocaust, because I don't know enough about it all. And it's not something that I've shied away from. And my life has been made better by Jewish families my entire life. Like I've only dated Jewish girls. It's Jewish moms and dads that helped me become the man I am, because they're great at that kind of stuff. And I was a kid who needed a lot of help and a lot of examples of that sort of thing. I can't tell you how many times, there's 3 families in particular I'm thinking of, with 3 girlfriends that mean as much to me as my own family. And all of those families lost people in the Holocaust. I follow the Auschwitz Memorial and I meditate on this stuff every day. I look at those pictures, and you think of what it would feel like as a parent, knowing your child was there with you in a camp. There is no comparison to the Holocaust because there's never been anything like it. It's a uniquely evil thing that is so beyond the pale, and I'm not comparing this with slavery, which was the other just horror. Like, are you kidding me? How does this happen? And it's the other thing they're not trying to teach about, by the way. Right? These things are allowed to metastasize in the world because you don't have enough sunlight and disinfectant on it. People want to move on and make jokes about it and act like it's, not a big deal. It's a horror that you should think about every day. We need to honor the lives lost, and we need to have a dialogue, because last weekend Nazis rallied in Orlando in the broad daylight. Okay. And now if people in this country understood the Holocaust in a deeper way, Nazis wouldn't have made it to lunchtime. Do you know what I'm saying? If you really fully in your heart knew what was going down, those bros wouldn't have been out there for hours harassing people and calling them Jews as they're driving by in their cars, right? They would have been dealt with. And I'm not advocating violence, but citizen's arrest or something, I would have duct taped those motherfuckers, you know what I mean? Thrown them in a moving van and dropped them off in front of the police station, right? They wouldn't have gotten away with that for 30 seconds in Germany, okay? And they'd be in prison for the rest of their lives just for flying the goddamn flags practically, because it's evil. But now it's popular again in this country, and that should terrify people. You know, and as I've been saying a lot recently, there's a lot of money in Florida, you know, that could fight against this. That's where you stand up to Ron DeSantis. Use that muscle. There's so many wealthy folks that have homes in Palm Beach and Miami that have powerful connections back up here in the East Coast. We could be doing something about this guy. And instead, nobody's doing something. Gorsuch is at Disneyland this weekend. Right? Nazis were rallying in Orlando outside of Disneyland, you know, like the state legislator is putting homophobic anti-LGBT laws on the books in Florida. They're burning books. In Tennessee, there was a book burning. Like, it's insane, you know, and only an ignorant populace would allow that stuff to happen. And I'm not just blaming the left for letting it happen. I'm talking about the people who buy into this shit. They buy into it because they're ignorant. You know, because they think it's cool and they believe the poison they've been sold by the Republican Party for most of their lives, that an immigrant or the other is their enemy. Instead, their enemy's right in front of them. They're putting 75 cents in a Coke machine and taking that can, you know, of the corporation. You know, they're filling their pickup truck up with gas from Chevron that's poisoning the rainforest and having oil leaks every other day. That's causing birth defects in people. You know, it's clear who the bad guys are, the Koch brothers and stuff, but they all have the Federalist Society. They have the Heritage Foundation, and that stuff gets filtered down into bro culture, right? It ends up as intolerance in a comedy club. Well, I'm just making a joke. No, you're being a misogynistic asshole and you're reinforcing toxic masculinity and racism. You know, Joe Rogan is not doing any favors to the world. It's not free speech. All the comedians he has on there are just bald dicks who say fuck every other word in their act, right? And they're popular because he was a pipeline for that. That's what the Comedy Store was in LA. And in New York, there's a famous basement comedy club that churns those guys out, right? They're just like, I'm just being politically incorrect. I'm an aggrieved white guy. That became very popular in comedy. The Louis C.K. crap. You know, everyone knew Louis C.K. was a scumbag and he was the biggest comedian there was. And I'm not supposed to say this because I'm a comedian, but don't even lump me in with those guys. First of all, I haven't made any money like they do, and I'm not trying to. And second of all, they're assholes. You know, when I used to do comedy clubs all the time, which wasn't that long a time, you know, because the pandemic came, I hated being in there half the time because every dude would get up and do some horrible, misogynistic, stupid, lowest common denominator joke because they saw the last guy do it, you know, and the audience laughed. That's what people think comedy is like. Oh, I'm going to sit in the front row and he's going to make fun of me for being fat, you know, or being gay or something like that. That's the act in these clubs. And I was like, why am I even exposing myself to this kind of stuff? This isn't art. And it's not to say things can't be funny and politically incorrect, but it's supposed to be satire that, as George Carlin said, you're punching up. You're going for the hypocrites in power that aren't representing the truth, you know, and that are screwing people over. And now it's not. It's just snivelly white guys being assholes to everything they don't understand and having other white dudes laugh at it, you know, or black guys. You know, Dave Chappelle opens for Joe Rogan. You know, he did a comedy tour with him in Florida, as I talked about on this podcast. Like, I wouldn't have been doing that. I'd be like, are you kidding me? First of all, I'm not going to do a show in Texas or whatever, but, you know, that's Dave's thing. That's almost his base is like MAGA guys and stuff, you know, and somehow he's able to like get away with it because he's seen as like some bastion of liberality or something. You know, it's weird. I never got it. I was never a fan, to be honest with you. He's obviously not without talent. He's talent, but when I lived downtown and he was playing like the Cellar and all those places all the time in the 90s, they were dumps, man. You know, I went to drama school. I was like, that is so far beneath me. You know what I mean? And people are going to get mad at me for saying this. I'm just being honest. You know, I was a songwriter before I became a comedian and an actor. I'm using this to try and illuminate some things I believe in. and make people laugh. I know I'm funny. I know how to write this stuff in a way that'll make it comical, but I'm trying to get you to think. I want you to leave a show of mine understanding that we're all together. We're all in this together, and only through harmony and understanding and sharing love and compassion can we get out of this thing. And that's what we look to our artists to give us. As I talk about Stevie Wonder all the time, you want somebody who's raising your vibrations, not raising your hackles and your malice and your resentment. Somebody giving you poison, if that's what they're giving you. It's not comedy. It's not art, right? It's nasty, but it sells.
The thing that I remember Dave Chappelle from first was Nutty Professor as the insult comic, like just trashing on Sherman Klump, who was heavy at the time, and he's just trashing on him. I've never been a fan of that. The first comedy show that I went to an open mic night to support my buddy, and I should have known not to sit toward the front, but being a heavy set guy, like the comedian spotted me. He could spot a mark, a mile away, and crapped on me for a couple minutes, but you leave yourself vulnerable to that situation when you're there. So lesson learned for next time.
And how'd that make you feel?
About that small.
Right.
And like the only thing you can do, since it's his performance, is like either laugh back or just be quiet. Like you can't, it's the most powerless feeling you can have. I think
me off to no end.
Yeah.
I don't really do crowd work. Like I can do improv stuff, but people always say that, like, are you going to pick on me if I come to your show? It's like, I don't pick on people. My stuff is prepared. Like I'm giving you the best of what I have at this particular moment, to talk about these things that I feel are real issues. I interact with the audience, but I'm not like, hey, where are you guys from? You meet on Tinder, there's all these tricks you can do in comedy, and that's a nightclub. You buy some drinks, you go in there, someone insults you. That's traditional comedy club stuff. Thankfully, alternative comedy went beyond that in storytelling, and I see myself more in storytelling these days, because you get room to stretch out. I love the one-liners, but Twitter almost solves that for me, because I can do it in real time. When you do that kind of topical stuff like I do in a comedy club, it has to be more generalized. I love how I can react to the moment about stuff that's going down. But I'm sorry that comedian put you on the spot like that. It's never cool. It's never fun. I imagine somebody with your circumstance is already pretty goddamn self-conscious in a public situation anyway, right? Not everybody has a walker.
I cared more that he talked about my mom.
He talked about your mom too?
Yeah, and like called her fat.
No.
Yeah, that whole thing.
This dude, who's the comedian? And remember his name?
The guy before him tried to make me feel better. He actually hit on me. He was like, if I was gay, dude, I would totally date you, but that wasn't funny.
That's inappropriate. Yeah, that's not.
Yeah. That's so like that wasn't, it was all distasteful, and at the end of it, I'm like, I actually tweeted the comedy club and I'm like, I'm not coming back. Thanks for the experience though.
What's the name of the comedy club? Because I'll make sure I never play there. Not that I do.
It's shut down since the pandemic. It was called Crackers.
Crackers. Well, it was called Crackers.
Yeah, it's a
in
comedy
Indiana.
Club
It was called Crackers.
In Indianapolis, called
right.
Crackers.
Oh my God, Crackers. Well, back to Crackers. Here's me and Jimmy, two crackers talking about the. That's insane.
Yeah,
I could do a whole thing on the history of crackers. It came from England and Scottish folk songs and stuff in Ireland, the term crackers, and then came here, and people get really like offended. White people, like, they'll equate cracker with the N-word, which is not even close. And our new mayor in New York City, a video was just released this morning where he called a bunch of other cops crackers. He be a cop. He's like, I kicked those crackers' ass. Talking about when he was a cop. That's going to be interesting,
Yeah.
But anyway. Wow. Well, I'm sorry you got insulted like that, Jimmy. But that's what I'm saying. And
that's life, man.
Right. You can tell, Jeff Ross is somebody who does the insult comedy thing and completely has a nice heart about it. Right. He's not being an asshole. Like, there's a way to do it, make it funny, and everybody sort of gets in on the joke, but it's not the appearance stuff, and someone's weight. That's just stupid. And I know I make fun of like politicians that are heavy set and stuff all the time. I can't help it. You know what I mean? Just because I'm trying to point out the hypocrisy, right? Everyone's acting like Trump is some macho virile stud. The guy has to be like literally squeezed into a hard plastic girdle, right? That they laced up in the back. A dude standing there with his foot on it, trying to put it on like a ski boot, right? It's insane if you saw that dude, right? He literally has double D's hanging over the side of the girdle. He's wearing a diaper. He's painted orange. He gets winded walking upstairs. He asked for a golf cart to go 50 feet from an SUV into the Museum of Natural History and would not get out of his car until we got him a golf cart. And I was there with Ivanka, and it was like, we can't bring a golf cart into a museum. It's a museum. Like, you're not driving a golf cart into the woolly mammoth. It's a Museum of Natural History in New York. That's how he is. He's lazy. He would take a full motorcade to go to the I think it's the Hayes Adam Hotel across the street from the White House. And that's where dignitaries stay. If you're Nelson Mandela and you're coming to visit the White House, you're staying there. It's like the royal kind of guest bedroom for our country. And traditionally, presidents would walk from the White House across the street. And when I was a bike messenger in DC, I would all the time see like George W. Bush walking across the street, or George H.W. Bush, the old man, walking across the street instead of taking an SUV. It was sort of like always this traditional photo op, and Trump gets in a SUV and drives, around the block and uses 8 cars to do it. So he's he wears a lady's watch to make his hands look bigger. Anything you need to know about the guy, that's it, right? But so that's when I do that kind of stuff, and I get pushback when I do it, and I probably deserve it, but to do it just to somebody who's buying a ticket and watching you perform, which is a privilege. It's an honor to be on stage entertaining people. And you should use that platform, in service of love, right? That's how I feel. And that might be too hippy dippy, but you have an opportunity to make this place better, to make people laugh, and laughter comes together. I'm not saying it has to all be clean and stuff, because these clean comics are kind of the biggest assholes, right? Bill Cosby would lecture other comics that they don't curse, and Seinfeld does the same kind of thing. And like, Jerry was dating a 17-year-old. Jerry Seinfeld would have been canceled in the 90s if he tried that shit today. He picked up a high school student in Central Park and was dating her for years. Like he got lucky. But my point is, and I'm a clean comic. Yeah, but you're dating a 17-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, how clean is that, bro? But anyway, I digress. Let's talk about, we did a lot of Trump stuff. Let's talk about, like, the Neil Young, Joe Rogan thing is fascinating. I mentioned last week I'd been to Neil's ranch. Neil has his son has cerebral palsy, and he has the Bridge School benefit every year, which is to raise funds for this school that he set up, because there's a guy who, difficulty happened in his family, and he saw how hard it was, how expensive it is with special needs, and how much research needs to be done in education, and how much more expensive it is to take care of your kid, and realize, like, he's a gazillionaire, right? But other people aren't. So let me make it easier for them. Let me raise some money. That's what you do as an artist. And CSNY, Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young, I was the road manager for CSN. So we did a show in England at the Royal Albert Hall. It was the end of a Crosby, Stills and Nash tour, rather, in Europe. It was a summer tour. And so we're doing the last show in September. I can't wait to fly back to New York City. I'd been on the road forever. And the band's manager came up to me backstage at Royal Albert Hall and was like, "Oh, Noel, you're flying directly from London to LA. And I booked you a rental car, and we're going to do a week's rehearsal with Neil Young in Burbank. And then we're going to fly up and do the Bridge School benefit right outside of San Francisco." So I'm like, oh my God, like, nobody told me, I thought I was going home, and the scariest part of that was driving the rental car in LA after flying from London, because I'm not a big driver anyway. And driving in LA is freaking terrifying. It's even more terrifying after you haven't slept, and you've been on an international flight. But my point is, so I did it. I survived. I stayed at the Sportsman's Lodge, which is this legendary hotel that shut down in LA, but all the bands would stay there because you could park tour buses in the lot, and it's in Studio City. And it was just an old Hollywood bungalow kind of vibe, awesome pool. They used to shoot porns there in the 70s, just a legendary place. You'd go there and there'd be like Link Ray and like Rascal Flatts would be around the pool or whatever. You know what I mean? Not Link Ray passed away, but there'd be like some old rocker, you know what I mean? And like some country act and then a metal band. It was hard to describe. Yeah, it was very cool. But and Neil stayed there. Me, Neil, and David Crosby stayed in this hotel for a week. And the cast of The Voice. The cast of The Voice was there at the same time too, which was bizarre. And Crosby would hold court every day and give these kids advice on the music business and listen to their songs. And he'd bring his guitar down and we'd sit on these chaise lounges outside the pool, like having these guitar pulls with these kids that were on this show. And Crosby was giving them all kinds of great advice, but only like Crosby does. Like he doesn't cut corners or bullshit. And the producers of The Voice got wind of this and moved the entire cast of The Voice out like one afternoon because they didn't want them falling under the spell of David Crosby.
Oh, wow.
And let them know basically they were getting ripped off, because that show's a ripoff. They get all your rights to your music if you win. It's draconian, the contracts those guys do, and they didn't want their marks becoming aware of this. But so it just shows you the integrity. And that's a Mark Burnett show, by the way. Mark Burnett is the producer of The Voice and NBC, right? So anyway, we're staying there for a week, and we drive and do these rehearsals in Burbank every day in the soundstage with CSN. And I used to run the teleprompter, right, for Crosby and Nash and basically for Stills. They have so many songs, the words are just there in case you lose your place, which I don't mind. Some people think, oh, that's cheating. It's not. It's just to have it there so you can be more in the moment. You're doing a guitar solo and you forget where the verse is, what verse you're coming in on, and a song you wrote 55 years ago, you should be able to glance down, right? It's just part of production, right? You got all these an extra amp and all this other stuff. You might as well have that there too. They have that in Broadway shows, right? If you go up on a line, you say line, and somebody in the wings is going to say, "For art thou, Romeo," or whatever, you know what I mean? So anyway, so I ran the teleprompter, and when they told me in London that like we were doing this gig, they were like, "You're going to run the teleprompter for Neil Young too." And I'm like, oh my God, like that's just intimidating, because Neil intimidates the hell out of me, So we go over in the first day of rehearsal in Burbank, and I meet with Neil's crew, who I toured with. Peggy Young, his wife who passed away. I toured with her before with Stephen Still. So I knew their crew and they're friendly. And basically the guy's like, "Here, I'll transfer these songs onto this, this computer I used for the teleprompter, which had, 200 CSN songs in it." And then he transfers 1,400 songs. And he goes, "Here's all the songs." And I go, "Which ones is he going to play today?" Because I wanted to pull them up. There's some technical stuff. You want to be able to do it in the moment, He goes, "Oh, he could call for any one of those songs at any time." You know what I mean? And I had a heart attack, because in a moment's notice, I was going to have to be able to pull up some obscure, version of a Neil Young song, and have it there for him, or get my ass chewed out, because Neil does not play. And not that he's mean. It's just, this stuff, you're at a high level, let me just put it this way, you don't Jackson Brown, Neil Young, like you've got to be on your game to work with these cats, and rightly so. But so I'm like, oh my God, I'm just sitting there having a heart attack this whole rehearsal. And I sort of guessed, like "Long May You Run," "Hard to Go," whatever. I kind of guessed at the songs that they'd be doing together, having not played together for a few years. And I was right. Like he never called for any of these other crazy songs, but it was nuts. And during that rehearsal, my friend who's a guitar tech for Stills, towards the end of it, started packing up the guitars. That's something that happens in a concert. When you get to the final two songs, you start packing up the gear, because you're going to load out. So you sort of get a head start with the equipment you're not using anymore. And there's a rock band playing in a room, right? So it's pretty loud, right? This kid snaps a guitar case latch shut, and Neil hears it. And he's like, "What is happening right now? Who's making that noise? That's unconscious. That just shows a lack of like sensitivity." And I was like, man, this guy is like in the moment. At first I thought like, he's being a dick. He doesn't have to call this guy out, but later I'm like, that's how he's rolling. Everybody in this room is in on this gig, is in on like serving the music, serving the muse, serving something higher than yourself. And then, so Then we'd get in the car and he'd get in his convertible Lincoln, right? Which is electric powered. It's called a Link Volt. It's this big, long 60s convertible and it runs on electricity or something, and he'd put on his cowboy hat and smoke, light up a spleef, and drive back, to Studio City. It was insane. It was insane. And then it got even more insane when I got to go to his ranch at the barbecue, and I'll tell that story another time. But when we did the actual show, it was like, Hart, who's in Ann and Nancy Wilson in Hart. I have one of Nancy Wilson's guitars. That's the white Telly, if any of the fans have seen my little music clips. And Tom Waits, like there was some badasses on this gig. The band called Fun, which is a big band. They were big at the time. And then CSNY. And all I'm thinking about all night is like, oh, I gotta, this teleprompter. I hope he doesn't call any other songs. I think I know what the set list is going to be. And we start the set and I'm basically on stage. He puts all the kids on a riser behind the band. So all these kids with special needs get to be on stage and they get the view that the rock star gets. Looking out at Shoreline, which is this beautiful outdoor amphitheater that Bill Graham, the great Bill Graham, built. Bill Graham himself being a Holocaust survivor who had to walk from France to Spain as a 12-year-old, separated from his family and his little sister, became a big rock promoter. And, but anyway, so these kids are getting this once in a lifetime experience too, which I always thought was awesome. And that's what I focused on, just these smiling kids getting to be on stage with this music and this groove. It just seemed like a wonderful way to incorporate it. And so I'm all nervous. I hope the set list is right. And we had these kind of old monitors, video monitors for the teleprompter that would kind of always given us trouble. And 2 songs into the set, the monitor completely goes out.
Oh.
Yeah, and Steven looks over at me and I'm like, you're on your own, dude. Like, you're going to have to remember the words tonight, and they did. And yeah, it was a great set. It was fine. It's just funny, and nobody cared. But so anyway, that's Neil Young. Neil Young's a good dude. He cares about the environment and the world. And, he's also like irascible, and he's a pain in the ass in many ways because he only cares about the muse and stuff. He'll just cancel a tour because he's not feeling it, and that hurts crew guys and whatever, but that's a separate issue and that's his prerogative. But he started an interesting dialogue because there is nothing more important now than dealing with this pandemic, right? There's no real rock tours. People are still doing it. They're still doing comedy clubs and comedy shows, but like the industry of entertainment has been severely affected. It will never ever be the same again. Anybody who's not telling you that is just not grasping reality. It'll never truly go back to the way it is before because these viruses are going to be with us forever now, right? It's not all just going to go away and everybody's safe and fine. This thing is going to continue to mutate, and it's going to do that because everybody didn't get vaxxed. If everybody had done what they should have done and gotten vaxxed last year, everybody who could safely get vaxxed, some people couldn't, and that's fine. We protect those people, but to not do it just because you heard Joe Rogan had some doctor douchebag on there telling you you have natural immunity and you're an athlete or something, or you look up to Aaron Rodgers is criminal, and you're defacing a part of the United States, right? You're defacing people's lifestyles. You're preventing other kids from going there and hearing that music and being inspired. We couldn't do that today. You couldn't go sit on stage right next to another kid with 50 kids on a stage in a post-pandemic era, could you, Jimmy? None of those kids could, right? So, because it wouldn't be safe. So anybody who's making the world less safe for children is an asshole. And Joe Rogan is on that list, and Neil Young ain't feeling it. He had polio as a kid. He knows what this shit is about. So it's ignorance, it's stupidity. It's not even worth another mention. I don't think I'll mention it again on this show. That's where I stand on this stuff. I'm not afraid of it. I'm not afraid of the dude bros. I'm not afraid of the truth. I'm not afraid of anything but what I see happening in this country that's not getting called out, is that these people are profiting mightily off of what's gone down, and we're not getting the pushback. I am afraid that DOJ doesn't take the action they need to take quick enough. Nobody's looking for dotting every I and T here. Get something to arrest him on and arrest him. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And
No, he's a sexual predator. Arrest him for raping people. That's where I would start. That's what I want to see him go to jail for. And no one even talks about that, right? We just gave him a pass on that. A lifetime sexual predator, who raped a famous woman he knew in Bergdorf and Goodman, right? And walked right out of there in broad daylight, knowing he would get away with it. And he did. He's still not answered for that. And the DOJ defended him in that. They took up his side in that case against E. Jean Carroll. Merrick Garland did, one of his first actions as Attorney General. That does not inspire confidence and the moral imperative to hold somebody accountable. This isn't just about the rule of law, or law. Law, we've always had two sets of justice in this country, right? An African-American woman just got sentenced to 6 years in prison this week because she was on probation and she registered to vote, attempted to register to vote, didn't even vote, just attempted to register because the probation department told her she was eligible, filled out a form saying such, and she submitted it to the voter registration board, and a white judge found out about it and threw her ass in prison for 6 years. MAGA guys all across this country voted on behalf of their dead moms and stuff and got a slap on the wrist and probation, and they throw a woman in jail for it. So it's not a fair justice system anyway. It always slants towards wealthy white folks, and black folks, right? Bill Cosby's free today. He's sitting in his mansion outside of Philly right now, putting some freaking Benadryl in a Seagram's and 7, and seeing if somebody's going to come over and visit him, it's insane because he's rich. So screw that. Go after the rich guys. Show us that you care. Do something about this.
Well, and the cases that, allow for that sort of thing, just give further license for it. We saw that with Kyle Rittenhouse. Like when you have rulings that go in the favor of things that are obvious crimes in a place like Wisconsin, it's going to pass down to Indiana, Ohio, the surrounding area. And Noel, I was thinking about the charity event that I founded with Timmy Global Health. It was a professional wrestling charity event where kids with disabilities could be a professional wrestler for the day. And like you talking about CSNY giving them the perspective of what a rock star is, that event basically gives kids the opportunity to get into the squared circle and be a professional wrestler for the day. So, that kind of reminded me of the event, that concert that you went to, the event that I founded, called it Timmy Takedown. And because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to do it because it's just not safe enough for kids to participate in that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's an unfortunate reality of where we are.
It is,
Yeah.
But, that's where we are. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this together. We will laughing at everybody else, don't laugh at, I don't like people laughing at poverty either. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there's so many issues to address in this country, go after the guys that are standing in the way of progress, and the women, even these folks that are falling for all this MAGA stuff. I don't hate them. Part of what fuels me in speaking out against this stuff is knowing that there's children going hungry because dad just bought another freaking AR-15 or sent Trump another $250 to keep the communists from taking over the country. Nobody's rich. Like we don't have a big middle class anymore. You have basically 1%ers and then everybody else, so there's not money to be spent on grifting politicians and the NRA and all this stuff. It saddens me to no end. And that's what I want to fight about and speak out against, but that's probably enough for this week. We've given you all an earful. I was going to get into the NFL. I'll do it next time. But Jimmy, when you first interviewed me, I met Jimmy, folks, because he has his own podcast, and he reached out to me on Twitter and was like, can you be on my podcast? And yeah. I did, right? That's how I met Jimmy. People often wonder. We've never met in real life or anything. But then he came on board to help me with mine. But I told you the story of Marshawn Lynch, when you first interviewed me, and no one's ever really been hip to what I was trying to say to that. I said it on this other podcast with my friends recently, and they kind of got it. But, Marshawn got it that day, and we'll get into that next week. Okay. But that was between Pete Carroll and Belichick, and I worked on the Super Bowl for almost 15 years, the halftime show. And it was such an example of the institutionalized racism that exists in the NFL, which again is no secret. Like we're talking about the Cosby stuff, like this guy Flores, Brian Flores, who wouldn't want that guy as their coach? You know what I mean? How well does he speak of himself, and how well does his record show? And then the fact that he gets fired and stuff. It's insane to think that like black men aren't qualified to be head coaches. What are you talking about? Who the hell do you think's been playing football? But they've always tried to keep it. The golden boy is going to be this, this white savior sort of quarterback. And you got another one last week, right? This kid's like Tom Brady too. I'm not dissing on him, but Jesus Christ, you know what I mean? And that's what you want.
Cool.
Yeah, and I get it. It's a business. So whatever. We'll get into that next week. I won't harangue your ears with that this week. Until then, be safe. The sun's getting a little brighter, staying light a little later, right? We're in February now. Month goes by quickly. It's Black History Month, the shortest month of the year, right? It's an old joke, but it's not funny. I'm just saying that's, you give them a short, cold month,
right.
Give them September, give them a month where people are paying attention, because Black history is American history. That's the other thing with this anti-CRT stuff. This is how evil happens. You don't let one specific set of people decide what history is and who is to be elevated and who is to be cast aside. That's what we need to stop and change. And that's what this moment is about. And that's what a dialogue on this stuff will give us. So until next week, we'll get into that some more, but be safe. We love you. We love all the support. I always appreciate you guys listening and sending notes and stuff. I got my t-shirts. If you want to support the podcast, they're at noelcasler.com. You can find Jimmy. Tell them where they can find you, Jimmy.
jbkonair.com. And you can search my podcast, JBK on Air. Same deal for social media too. Twitter and Instagram, JBK on Air. So
there you go. Get your thirst trap on. Go find Jimmy, ladies. I know you couldn't see him on video on YouTube. Hopefully it works out this week. But you couldn't see the video, so you had to go to Jimmy's OnlyFans page to see him in the last couple of weeks. But we'll be back on there. We'll be back on YouTube. Check us out. Be safe. We love you. Till next week. Peace.